On the 13th of November 2022, the MMA world said goodbye to Anthony "Rumble" Johnson, a former UFC and Bellator veteran regarded as one of the hardest punchers in the sport's history. Today, we look at the highs and lows of Rumble's 15-year career and what it was that made him, at one point, MMA's most feared fighter. Welcome to the INC, and this is the story of Anthony "Rumble" Johnson. It's safe to say Anthony Johnson was a fighter from the very beginning. The fifth of 10 children, Johnson was legally adopted by his grandparents at the age of 2, and had originally intended to pursue a career in football inspired by his hero, Walter Payton. When his gridiron dreams fell through, Johnson instead turned his attention to wrestling, going on to win a junior national wrestling championship with Lassen College. After spending the following years working as a bouncer, Johnson was encouraged to take up MMA, and in 2006, he made his pro debut for the PF promotion in Hollywood, beating 1-0 Jonathan Romero in the first round. Johnson claimed a further 2 wins competing in a one-night tournament in Colorado, and it didn't take long for the fighter to set his sights on the UFC, auditioning for the 6th season of the company's reality show, The Ultimate Fighter. Despite failing to make the show, Johnson's audition stayed in the mind of company bosses. And when Steve Bruno withdrew from his match with Chad Reiner, Johnson agreed to take his place on 5 days' notice. Rumble taking just 13 seconds to make an impact on the promotion.
Reiner's hurt, and now he's down, and it is all over! Anthony Johnson, outstanding!
Johnson followed the triumph with a first-round finish of Tom Spear, quickly developing a reputation as a raw but powerful knockout artist. Despite this, some questions were raised over the sustainability of Johnson's success. Rumble was known for being one of the biggest weight cutters in the sport, giving Johnson a huge size advantage, but leaving him vulnerable should the fight reach the later stages. This came to fruition in his match with Rich Clemente, where Johnson fell 7 pounds short of the welterweight limit before being submitted for his first career loss. It was Johnson's match with Kevin Burns in 2008 that brought the fighter to the national stage, although not for the right reasons. During the fight, Burns repeatedly tagged Johnson with eye pokes, with the final poke being so severe it caused Johnson to collapse to the floor in distress. Rather than disqualify Burns, referee Steve Mazzagatti scored the strike as a knockout, making Burns the only man to ever win a fight via eye poke. After failing to get the match overturned, Johnson and Burns squared off in a rematch at the Ultimate Fighter finale, where Rumble managed to exact revenge in emphatic fashion.
Oh! It is all over!
Following the fight, Johnson enjoyed the best run of his first tenure, winning 4 of his next 5 fights, including Charlie Brenneman, Yoshiyuki Yoshida, and former title challenger Dan Hardy. A decision win proving Johnson was more than a knockout artist. The upturn in form, however, shielded controversy outside the cage. In 2008, Johnson pleaded no contest to a domestic battery charge against his then-girlfriend, and ended up serving 3 years probation. Johnson faced 2 further accusations in 2014 and 2019, a dark cloud that hung over the fighter for the rest of his career. By 2012, Johnson accepted defeat in his battle with the Bulk, and announced a move to middleweight to face Vitor Belfort at UFC 142, where Rumble hoped the extra 15-pound threshold would bring an end to his weight-cutting demons.
197! So Anthony is overweight, and he has to weigh 205 by tomorrow.
While Johnson met his opponent's demands, the cut had taken a major toll on his performance. Belfort dominated the fight on the ground on his way to a first-round submission. A third weight miss proved the final straw for the UFC, and added with his domestic violence charge, Johnson was released by the promotion later that year. After missing weight for his post-UFC bout with David Branch, Johnson made a further jump in weight and decided to ply his trade as a 205er. It would be a decision that transformed his career. Johnson's first match at light heavyweight came against Esteves Jones for Titan Fighting Championships, dominating the fight with his wrestling before claiming a second-round stoppage. From then on, Johnson never looked back, going unbeaten outside the UFC with his famed knockout power amplified at his new weight. Johnson even managed to quash his eye poke demons against DJ Linderman for the World Series of Fighting.
Oh! Dropped him!
After a 6-fight winning streak, including a one-off heavyweight bout with Andrei Arlovsky, Johnson was considered one of the sport's biggest free agents. And just over 2 years after his release, Johnson was back in the UFC as a transformed fighter. Rumble made his return in the co-main of UFC 172. While a decision win over Phil Davis won few headlines, the same could not be said for his bout with Rogerio Nogueira, Johnson taking just 45 seconds to finish the former Pride veteran. This led Johnson to his first UFC main event, where he took on former title challenger Alexander Gustafsson at Fight Night Stockholm. The fight was intended as a homecoming for Gustafsson, the Mauler competing for the second time since his career-defining bout with Jon Jones, and he entered the match as a -290 favorite. It took all of 2 minutes for Johnson to silence the punters and the 30,000 fans in attendance.
Oh, that was a big one.
It's all over! Anthony Rumble Johnson!
Wow.
Finishes Alexander Gustafsson!
Having once been shamed out of the UFC, Johnson was now one of the company's most feared fighters. And in February 2015, he was booked against light heavyweight king Jon Jones at UFC 187, with many picking Rumble as the man to end the champion's reign of terror. The match, however, never took place, as Jones was arrested in connection with the hit-and-run incident and suspended by the UFC. Johnson, however, would still get the chance to fight for UFC gold, taking on a short-notice Daniel Cormier for Jones' newly vacant title. Johnson became the first man to drop Cormier early in the first round, but the former Olympian's wrestling soon took a toll on Johnson's conditioning, succumbing to a rear naked choke midway through the third round. The fight dealt a blow to Johnson's reputation as a feared knockout artist, with the fighter openly admitting his nerves going into the fight had an adverse effect on his performance. Despite this, Johnson's fighting style and a weak light heavyweight roster meant a second title fight was well within reach. It would be up to the fighter to go about trying to earn it. Rumble made his case in emphatic fashion, beating Jimmy Manuwa at UFC 191 before a ground and pound finish of Ryan Bader 4 months later. This led Rumble to a match with Glover Teixeira at UFC 202, and with the fight serving as the co-main to Nate Diaz vs. Conor McGregor, both men had a golden chance to stake their claim for a title shot.
Interesting. Oh! Just like that! Good Lord. Wow!
Johnson's 13-second knockout was one of the fastest in division history, and a rematch between himself and champion Cormier was soon on the cards. Originally planned for December, the fight instead took place at UFC 210, with Rumble yet again entering the match as the bookmaker's favorite. Despite being billed as striker versus grappler, Johnson chose to ignore his corner and attempted to wrestle against the former Olympian. It proved to be his undoing, as Cormier dominated the fight on his way to a second-round stoppage, a win even faster than their first meeting 2 years prior. Johnson's decision-making took many in the sport by surprise. It was nothing, however, compared to what happened next.
It's just time for me to move on to something else. I'm tired of getting punched by guys and rolling around on the ground with guys and stuff like that. I would never, ever forget you. And what better place than to end my career in Buffalo, New York.
Despite being 33 and in his physical prime, Rumble announced his retirement from the sport, choosing to pursue a career in bodybuilding, where the former welterweight's weight climbed up to as high as 290 pounds. Despite this, Rumble faced continued questions over returning to the sport, and in August 2020 announced he had returned to the USADA testing pool. Most speculated Johnson would return to the UFC, even doing so as a full-fledged heavyweight. Nothing about Rumble's career, however, was conventional. In February 2021, Johnson was revealed as one of 8 fighters for the Bellator Light Heavyweight Grand Prix, with the UFC veteran making his company debut at Bellator 258. Originally, Johnson was set to face fellow newcomer Yoel Romero, setting up the prospect of a dream match between two of the sport's most explosive fighters. A week before the fight, however, Romero was pulled from the tournament after failing his pre-fight medical, leaving Johnson to make his company bow against 7-2 Jose Augusto. Johnson's comeback got off to the worst start, being dropped and nearly finished by his unheralded Brazilian opponent, until Rumble chose to roll back the years early in the second round.
Oh!
Johnson's win saw him advance to the semifinal, where the veteran was set to face light heavyweight champ Vadim Nemkov at Bellator 268. 4 weeks before the fight, however, Johnson was forced to withdraw from the bout due to an unspecified illness. It would be the ailment that ultimately claimed his life. Unbeknown to the wider public, Johnson had been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a blood cancer causing severe damage to the body's immune system. Despite being upbeat on social media, fans grew concerned at Johnson's increasingly frail appearance, with fighters and training partners calling for thoughts and prayers for their friend. It proved to be one battle too many, and on the 13th of November 2022, Johnson passed away at the age of 38, his MMA career ending at 23 wins and 6 losses. Rumble Johnson's legacy is a complex one. While his scandals outside of the cage are worthy of criticism, many speak highly of his humility and willingness to help his peers, a stark contrast from the fearsome competitor that graced the octagon for several years. Rumble leaves having a lasting impression on both his peers and fight fans. Depending on what you believe, however, there may be one more fight awaiting Rumble in the future. One day.
My man Bones right here. Keep your head up, baby. All right, I know we didn't give the fans the fight that they wanted. Maybe in the next life we'll do that.
This is the INC. Please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a video.